You're now listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.
Hello, Colorado. This is the Engage the Rockies podcast. I am your host, Jarvis Caldwell, Executive Director of Engage the Rockies. This week's episode, we're going to be covering two issues at the El Paso County level that I feel like did not get talked about enough in the news. And the first topic that we're going to discuss is a drug needle exchange program in El Paso County. And that got a little bit of coverage in the Gazette, I think one article, and then we'll go into the so-called Safe Spaces bill and what the county commissioners did in regards to that, which I don't believe got any coverage. And so we wanted to bring it to you and make you aware of what's going on. So for today's episode, we have Commissioner Longinos Gonzalez Jr. He serves as the serves on behalf of District 4 on the Board of County Commissioners. His district encompasses southern and eastern El Paso County, including the towns of Fountain, Security, Widefield, Hanover, Ellicott, Rush, Yoder, and the southeast areas of Colorado Springs, as well as the unincorporated areas of Strathmore Hills. Commissioner Gonzalez took the oath of office for his second four-year term on January 12th, 2021. Commissioner Gonzalez, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on today as well.
Absolutely. So this first issue we're going to talk about here is a drug and needle exchange program. Again, like I said, I don't think it got nearly enough coverage, but I just want to give the listeners some background on this from the Gazette article. So it says the Colorado Health Network has been providing a needle exchange program for at least 3 years. It's required by law that they inform and work with certain groups before doing so. CEO Daryl V. Hill stated, Colorado Health Network has worked with cross-section of the community since the passage of House Bill 1065 in June 2020 to inform stakeholders of our plan to open a syringe access program in Colorado Springs. The stakeholder process included public officials, treatment providers, small businesses, and public safety officers. The statute specifically states that local law enforcement and district attorneys have to be consulted. District Attorney Michael Allen stated he was not consulted or made aware of it. So, Commissioner Gonzalez, it states here that public officials are one of the stakeholders that should be consulted on this. And I'm just curious, as a commissioner, and you may be able to speak a little bit for the board as well, if you know whether they were aware of it or not. But I'd like to get your take on it. Were you aware of the drug needle program when this story came out?
No, and that's why it's so concerning to see a drug needle exchange, or they call it syringe access programs, started without any consultation and any stakeholder meetings. The revised statute from 2020 clearly stated and left in place a stakeholder meetings requirement for these nonprofits with needle exchange experience. And that statute, the original bill that changed the law in 2020 was House Bill 1065, but it left in place a provision that prior to beginning operations, so it's prior, it's stated in there, shall, and shall means must in the legal system, shall utilize stakeholder meetings as per subsection 1 of the original revised statute. If you go back to the original statute, you will see that stakeholders are defined in the statute. And amongst that definition, it says local law enforcement agencies, district attorneys, and then others, ... So there's not a specific county commissioners, it's not specific city council members, but it lists several other generic leaders and local leaders and health experts. However, it very specifically says district attorneys. And that's why the statement by our district attorney is very relevant to this, because he says he did not participate. And so if he did not participate, it's very clear they did not properly conduct stakeholder meetings. I honestly don't think they did any stakeholder meetings because, to my knowledge, none of the local elected officials are aware that it had started until I brought it forth over a month ago, and it made the Gazette. And from our Board of Health meeting last month, it was very clear no member of the county board of health, and neither of our public health director was aware of this. So when they say they held stakeholder meetings, nobody from public health, director, leadership, or the board of health was even aware of this. So
Yeah.
I think it's an insult to the public to say they actually held the meetings as they put in the Gazette.
Yeah, so because it says, like you said, kind of generically public officials, which, from my position looking at this, I go, okay, it specifically says district attorneys, and they apparently did not let Michael Allen know about it. So obviously that's a problem. But if it also leaves it open to other public officials, and it's like, well, you guys have oversight, correct, of like the budget and the district attorney's office, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you guys. Is that correct? Do you guys? I know you oversee the district attorney's office budget. Is that right?
We provide budgetary support to the district attorney. But in this case, if they didn't notify us or the district attorney, the stakeholder meetings, we would not be aware of it. And again, I would think somebody from the district attorney's office would have been aware. Right,
exactly. And I'm sure they probably would have at least made you guys aware. But it sounds like they didn't consult with anybody. I'd be curious to know if our sheriff or CSPD chief of police, if any of them knew about it too, because it does say law enforcement officers. And so I don't recall seeing in the article if they actually had reached out, if the journalist had reached out to the actual law enforcement officers. But it very specifically says that District Attorney Michael Allen didn't know about it.
And that's
Please go ahead.
One of my big concerns here is that the lack of transparency by the organization, and why it's relevant is because if they are not compliant with the state statute that tells them how they could legally have started. And again, this happens because several years ago, the Board of Health rejected a needle exchange. The legislatures, the liberals in the legislature passed the bill in 2020 to take away the approval authorities of the Board of Health because they were upset. El Paso County Board of Health rejected needle exchanges. Colorado Springs was then the only large city without one. And so they took our rights away, left this provision in place. However, if they are not compliant with having started, which I believe they did not legally start, then it means they've been giving out all these needles and also safe snorting kits, smoking kits, pipes that I've seen it referenced in their literature. They're giving out, these all violate the local or the statewide drug paraphernalia law. So my belief is that they're also violating the drug paraphernalia law, which is why I sent an email to the mayor asking them to investigate. And if they had not started legally, then I said enforce the law. I said shut them down, but enforce the law. Go and cite them, which they can on the drug paraphernalia law. And so I've just been asking about public safety, enforcement of the law, and it's been very difficult because the mayor have been very slow to respond. 5+ weeks. They finally put out a statement yesterday, I believe, or the day before. However, that statement excluded any commentary on the stakeholder process. And so to me, it looks like the city, whoever it is, the mayor, anybody in leadership there, it looks like they've not been very active in trying to actually see if they were legally started. And it looks like they do not want to shut them down. And it's very concerning because I actually did a Cora and they received no information from the needle exchanges except a statement of that they had started some sort of stakeholders, but no proof of times, locations, participants, nothing that showed justification that they could prove that they actually held stakeholder meetings. And that's why I'm very disappointed in the city, because it doesn't look like the mayor's office is actually trying to investigate this thoroughly.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you brought up a few important points there, and this is in the Gazette article as well. So this is something that's been ongoing. This wasn't, it says that they've been giving it out for the last 3 years, but the kind of the process of it, this was all the way back in 2017 when they were, I guess, bringing it to public officials to want to do this. But what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is in state law, basically you guys could shut it down and say, no.
We could.
Right.
In 2017 through 2020, we were allowed to, and then they took that away from us with the bill in 2020.
And, an issue that we've talked about on here, we had Representative Don Wilson on here to talk about local control at the state legislature because We talked in the regards of housing and development, but this is another issue where I look at it and I go, this is a local control issue, because if El Paso County decides, or the city decides, you know what, we don't want this needle exchange program in our area, basically the state government is stepping in and saying, you know, we're going to take away that ability for you guys to control that. And what I gathered from doing the research on it was El Paso County and Colorado Springs traditionally had been like the last big holdout on this issue, because I think Boulder and Denver and Fort Collins and other places had been doing it already. And El Paso said, look, we're El Paso and Colorado Springs said we're not going to be doing this. And then so the state legislature stepped in 2020 and said, you know, hey, sorry, you don't get that choice anymore. We're going to allow it. But, you know, and I'm sure this probably came through amendments or something in the process, but it looks like that basically there was a carve out saying, well, okay, we're going to take away your ability to say no to it. However, we will give you, throw you a bone here and let you guys at least be consulted about it first ahead of time. Right. But it sounds like that's not been happening. And it sounds like
that didn't happen.
Right.
And the transparency, the lack of transparency is what was very upsetting, because right. I think if they had actually held stakeholder meetings, not that we could have voted no, right? We don't have those authorities anymore. I think the public outcry would have been great. And they purposely, I believe, attempted to avoid that and the backlash that they would have gotten publicly. And so that's what I believe. And it's just a shame that they tried doing that. One of the other things I did find of interest during my investigation was in trying to find out, and I did this because the city of Pueblo early last month, passed a ban, and we're looking to pass a ban on their needle exchange after 10 years, I think, that they had been operating, and they finally decided that they've had enough, and they passed a city ordinance against it. And so I was doing research, and that's where things started popping up about Colorado Springs needle exchange. And I said, well, we don't have a needle exchange. Then I found out we do, and it was on the state CDPHE website, the state Board of Department of Public Health and Environment. And I started inquiring at the state level. When did this start? Did you get supported documentation that they had done the stakeholder meetings? And the state basically was also hands off and said, well, we don't have any real investigation or oversight, or the CDPHE. And so I asked them very directly, well, then please give me the information of the department that is in charge of oversight of the needle exchanges at the state level. And lo and behold, they came back and stated that there is no department at the state that actually now oversees needle exchanges. So it's even a greater insult that this bill passed, and they put no provisions on once they're started, who supervises them, who can investigate them. What if they actually start doing things that are illegal? No oversight authority at the state. It's an insult that this bill could have gotten passed in the first place to take away our local control, and then there's no enforcement provisions in case they do exceed their authorities.
Yeah, and I mean, you just answered my follow-up question, which is, you know, if the commissioners don't have oversight of it, and it sounds like the city doesn't really have oversight of it, then, you know, it's like, well, what if they're doing something unhealthy or whatever, violating the law in some way? It's like, okay, well, then who steps in to address that issue? And it sounds like probably nobody right now, which should be worrisome to anybody.
And I do believe, I do believe that there may be an opportunity for the city to do something. The city of Pueblo passed a ordinance. It was really more of a kind of a nuisance ordinance on discarded needles, but it could potentially be considered a ban. I mean, they called it in general a ban. It was really more of a nuisance ordinance where they would be fining and citing individuals, which is lower level, but they could pile up and I believe eventually turn into felonies if they continued on. And so essentially it was a ban, but it was based on citations, not just a shutdown of needle exchanges in Pueblo. They're going through a lawsuit right now, but Colorado Springs could do something similar, and I believe some of the city council members are looking at it. One of the things that the ACLU is suing on behalf of the needle exchange in Pueblo stated that well, this is stepping on the authorities of the state. But I think I've proven that the state doesn't have actually any oversight. I think it leaves it open for the cities to step in. If they actually had some oversight at the state level, I think they could claim, well, you're stepping on the state. But if there's no oversight, I think the city may be able to actually do something and not violate the law. And then as somebody from the city leadership stated was, well, they're concerned about the lawsuit at Pueblo. I reminded her that, well, there's a big difference. The Board of Health down in Pueblo had originally approved the needle exchange program. And so it had been operating legally up to the point that the city passed the ban ordinance last month. I believe that the needle exchange here in Colorado Springs has never been legally operating. And I think that's a big difference in terms of concerns about a lawsuit.
Yeah, and if you've done the Cora request, it's like there should be evidence there. I mean, because I've had to go through Cora requests before when I worked at the Capitol, and you had, it's like it can come down to just as simple as a calendar, your calendar showing that you had a meeting with someone to discuss something, and it's like if Colorado Health Network, consulted with these people, I mean, they should at least be able to provide a message where they reached out to them, or a calendar, a calendar invite or something showing that, yeah, we did go meet with this person. There should be some kind of communication there. And you would think, if I was starting up this program, I would make sure that once I consulted with somebody, maybe I had them sign it, or at least document it in a memorandum saying, on this day I met with this official and we discussed this, and keep a track record of it. And it sounds like they didn't do that, or at least they didn't provide that once it was requested, which I think for transparency in government and everything, I think that's not good, obviously.
Right. And that was one of my other concerns was when I initiated an email to the mayor of Colorado Springs, 13 May. I ended up finally getting a call from him on 23 May. That afternoon, he had told me that he had activated his people and they were looking into it. But after I heard nothing for weeks on end, I ended up making another email. I did the Cora request, and the Cora request shows that the mayor Mobilade, had actually done a Teams meeting with the needle exchange nonprofit leaders and received an email from them the morning that he called me. I mean, he called me in the afternoon. He didn't mention them at all. Didn't mention getting an email, but the email clearly doesn't show any proof. Again, it was some documentation, a study, and some defense flyer type of stuff for why needles are good, needle exchanges are good. And the only comment was a statement that they had been participating with stakeholders or working with stakeholders, but no evidence at all of, like you said, dates, times, participants, email chains of invites, which you would have thought you'd have gotten. So again, it just looked quite interesting that that the mayor had gotten this information prior to talking to me, didn't mention it, and then also that nothing happened in the weeks after until I emailed them again several weeks later, and that they actually received basically no evidence that the stakeholder meetings were ever conducted, and no reference to utilizing or including the district attorney.
That's interesting. So last question on this, sir, and I'm sure this is a question that will come up. So the needle exchange program, correct me if I'm wrong, this is done through maybe donations to nonprofits. This is not a taxpayer-funded needle exchange, correct? Like there's not tax money buying these needles.
Well, it's taxpayer in that the grants, the taxpayers are involved because most of these grants are state and federal. So to my knowledge, none of the local county funds are going to this. It was interesting as I was inquiring about the organization. I did ask the Opioid Council, if you've been following that with the opioid settlements, a lot of big pharma issues. The state has gotten big chunks of money, and so locally, all the municipalities, PPACG organizations have come together to give out some grants. I actually asked if this organization had put in for a grant request, and they actually had, but they did not make it out of the first round of inquiries. And so, to my knowledge, it's a state and federal funding. and unfortunately, they are utilizing a couple of our local other nonprofits and medical facility and another location, the parking lot. But I think some local donations go to some of those, not necessarily government as far as I can tell, but I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I mean, I will not vote to provide any grants from our county or public health to any of the entities that are housing or being used by the nonprofits to do the needle exchanges. And so if I find out that there are any, I will make sure that we cease funding that. But I'm not
Absolutely.
aware of any that are.
Okay, good to know. And as this progresses and we start finding out more and we come to a conclusion, we'll make sure that we bring you back on to give us an update and
Sure.
see where this ended up at. We really appreciate that. Okay, sir, I want to respect your time. Something I wanted to make sure that we got to is the Safe Spaces bill. Now, I don't believe this was covered at all in the media. However, I did go on the county commissioners, the El Paso County Commissioner's website, and then I was able to see I don't know if you'd call it a resolution or a memorandum or a statement on this. But so to give people background, it's the so-called Safe Spaces bill, which is a gun bill, and it's Senate Bill 24-131, entitled "Concerning Prohibiting Carrying a Firearm in Sensitive Spaces, recognized by the United States Supreme Court as places at which longstanding laws prohibited carrying firearms." That's the bill title, which I think is why people have simplified it to either the Sensitive Spaces Bill or the Safe Spaces Bill. And so this is basically, it's putting a restriction on places that you can carry firearms. I believe college campuses was a big part of this, preventing the concealed or open carry on college campuses. And so basically the county commissioners, you guys, back in May, it looks like, I think May 7th. So the governor signed this bill on May 31st, but in anticipation that he was going to sign this bill on May 7th ahead of time, you guys took action on this. And I think you led this charge. And so if you can kind of let our listeners know what you guys did in response to this bill before it got signed.
Sure, and thanks, because we saw another infringement on our Second Amendment rights as citizens. We wanted to get out in front of this. We wanted to make sure that we approved ours before it even went into place, and with clearly our comments saying that our exemption to the law would begin on the same day. We didn't.
Right.
We did not want to give them any time, and I think that's part of the reason it didn't get the press that it might have deserved or should have deserved, because we did it preemptively before the governor even finished signing it, because we were so upset about this infringement on our Second Amendment rights. So it was good to see, though. I do remember seeing something. I believe it was Douglas County did something similar to the county, exempted out, and then just last week, I believe, a Monument did something, and that one made the local press. But I think the mayor went on the radio and commented on, and I told the radio host later, I was like, yeah, the county did it too. We just did it like a month or two ago. So it was we wanted to make sure we're protecting everybody's rights. The big thing here is that we exempted all our buildings from this, our county government buildings. Now, clearly, there are some things we are not going to allow people to take a concealed carry gun into the jailhouse or to the courthouse. Or I mean, there's some logic here, but all our other buildings that we had rules in place before the governor and the liberal legislature tried again, taking away our local control and decision making away from the locals. We kept those back in place with the exemption, and so we were proud to do that. We want to continue to stand up for our Second Amendment rights, and we're going to continue to do that. And on all our, constitutionally protected rights. And so it was the right thing to do. It's unfortunate they took away the rights of a lot of the schools and safe spaces that they call. All they do is they make them unsafe when they do something like this. And you do not allow, lawful, just and upright citizens and residents who do have a right to carry to protect themselves or to protect their neighbors in cases where there's need. And so it's unfortunate that they did that, but let's let's maybe win some elections and get something changed and overturned in the future. And some of these you might be able to challenge in court as well.
Yeah. So kind of big picture what that bill is, it was the state government trying to tell the rest of the state, we're going to limit where you can conceal carry at. However, there is this carve out where local governments can take action and say, no, we're going to allow this in the buildings that we control, that are government buildings. And so that's what you guys did. You guys took action. You said, nope, we already allow it in these specific government buildings. We're going to continue to allow it in these specific government buildings. And as you pointed out, which is a very important exception, there are places before this bill was passed that you can't carry a firearm, that you still can't carry a firearm, which I'd pulled it from your resolution here, and it's El Paso County Judicial Complex, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, and the 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office, I believe. I think I pulled that correctly. But yeah, like you said, you can't go into the jail with a gun, which that was true before this bill passed. It's still true, right?
Right.
Good.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there that make absolute sense, right? And those were in place before, because we're good conservatives, but and there's some general common sense on how we're going to run government, and but we made sure we exempted everything we could from that where we could on that law. And I was ashamed they had to pass it, because even though we were exempt, others were not. And I think, unfortunately, you may see something where somebody gets hurt because somebody wasn't allowed to protect themselves, defend themselves legally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just to give some perspective on this, because I know you're an Air Force Academy grad and served in the Air Force. I served a little bit of time as well, and so when I worked in the JAG Corps, even in the courtroom, some judges specifically wouldn't even let the local police, the military police, right, our security forces, they wouldn't even let them into the courtroom with a weapon unless they got permission ahead of time. So it's pretty standard across the board. Like, obviously, you don't want people bringing guns into a jail because they could give it to a prisoner or something. And then judges, a lot of times, it's court. There's a lot on the line there, and so it makes sense that you wouldn't want to carry into a courtroom. And I don't think really any judges would allow it anyways, and because they pretty much control the courtroom when they're sitting at the bench. So makes sense, sir. Listen, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for agreeing to come on and cover this subject. I think this is very important. A lot of our listeners are local El Paso County listeners, and so it's important that they know these things. And so whenever we see a topic like these things that just I feel like wasn't covered enough, or maybe needs some further explanation, it's always important to bring our local officials who are on the front line and who are actually dealing with this. And obviously, in this situation, you were absolutely at the front line because you were leading this charge. So we're very honored to have you on here. We appreciate it very much. And as I mentioned, we'll bring you back on to give us an update on this needle exchange program when we find out more down the road.
Thank you, and I appreciate letting me speak on both topics and continue to fight for you and for our Constitution.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.